Okay, lesson 2 is about rectangular components of a spatial force. Now, this lesson covers rectangular components of a spatial force involving now the three axes, namely the x, the y, and the z axis. And then we are also going to discuss the rectangular components, how to solve for the rectangular components of the given force. So meaning to say we are going to express a given force into its rectangular components. At the end of this lesson, the student must be able to express a force in terms of its rectangular components and then solve for the magnitude and direction angles of a force. Okay, so you should have taken this self-assessment test. Okay, the rectangular components of a spatial force system, okay, are very much similar to the coplanar force systems, okay, with, of course, the addition of new axis, okay, and that is the z-axis. So before, we are very familiar with the x and the y, okay, but now another axis has been added. So we need to find also its rectangular components and how does this new axis affect the resultant. Okay. So rectangular components of a spatial force. So take a look at these two figures. Okay. Figure 6-1A and B. Okay. So before, we have this x-axis and the y-axis only, okay? So that is our plane axis, no? Consisting only of x and y, no? But now, as you can see, there is now the z-axis here, okay? So this is the origin, labeled by O. From the origin going to the right is the positive x. And then from the origin going up is the positive y. And from the origin going towards U, no, papunta sa atin, kung tayo yung point of view, from O, then papunta sa atin, that is the positive z. Okay? So, if you are given these three axes as the orientation, no, ganito mismo yung binigay, then all of this, okay, all of these show the positive directions. Okay? So meaning to say, lahat ng hindi na ipakita rito will be their opposite. Okay? So for example, from the origin going horizontally to the left, that is the negative x. Okay? And then from the origin going vertically downward, that is the negative y. And from the origin going away from you, papunta doon, that is the negative z. Okay? So, let's have this given force from the origin up to A. So that is the force F along the line of action OA. Okay? Now, the x component of F is this one, from O up to E. Okay, that is the x component, fx. Fy is from O up to C. Okay, and from O to D, that is F sub Z. Okay. So that is the three components, okay? Okay, so those are the three components of F. Okay, now take note that nakita nyo rito sa figure A, yung F, di ba parang yung F, it appears that F is located along the XY plane, no? Kung titingnan nyo, parang XY plane, but it's not. Okay? So to further visualize this, let's put this inside the box. Okay, so refer to figure B. Okay, nakita niyo yung figure B. So yung force F is from the origin, yung corner sa baba ng box, papunta dun sa top corner to the right ng front plane. Okay? Siya yung diagonal ng box. Okay? At hindi siya doon sa XY plane. So from the origin, yung corner ng box sa baba, papunta ka sa opposite corner sa taas. Yun yung location ng F, no? So that is F along the line of action OA. Okay? Now, paano naging X component niya si Fx? Okay. From the arrowhead of F, you drop a perpendicular line, okay, down to the positive x-axis. Okay? So mula sa A, mag-drop kayo ng perpendicular line with the positive x-axis, no? So that is the dotted line here, forming a right triangle. Ano yung right triangle na yun? AEO. Yun yung right triangle, AEO, with the right angle at E. Okay, so ito yung 90 degrees. Now, please correct this on your notes na itong angle theta sub C, it is not theta sub C but theta sub X. Okay, so please do the necessary correction. This is theta sub X. It is the angle made by force F with the positive x. So that is theta sub x. Now, the angle that is made by the force F with the positive y, this one, ito yung theta sub y, that is theta sub y. Okay? Yung angle between F and the y-axis. And the angle between F and the z-axis is theta sub c. Okay? So as I've said, please correct this. This is theta x. So this is theta y, theta sub c. Okay? Now, so what is the x component of F? Now, since this side, itong OE, is adjacent to theta sub x, then therefore, hello? Hindi pa, daanan ko na lang. Ay, sana, maaga naman ako. So, theta sub, itong OE is adjacent to theta sub x, and that angle is an acute angle of this right triangle. So, therefore, Fx is equal to F cosine of this angle. Okay? So, Fx, the x component of the force F, is equal to F cosine theta x. Now, similarly, if we drop a perpendicular from point A papunta dun sa positive y-axis, so that is the 90 degrees at point C. So we form a right triangle ACO. Okay? Triangle ACO with point C as the right angle. And this is F sub y, and F sub y is adjacent to the angle theta sub y, and this is also an acute angle of the right triangle ACO. So therefore, Fy is equal to F cosine theta sub y. Why cosine? Because yung F sub y is the adjacent. Okay? Now take note that F is always representing the hypotenuse of the right triangles. Okay? Hypotenuse siya. And when we go to the z-axis, so from A, we drop a perpendicular line down to the positive z-axis with right angle at point D. So dito sa point D yung right angle. So we form a right triangle ADO with angle D as the right angle. Now, Fz is adjacent to theta sub c. Okay? Adjacent siya sa theta sub c. Okay? So therefore, f sub z is equal to f cosine of theta sub c. That is the z component of f. With f as the hypotenuse of the right triangle ADO. Okay? Now, how are we going to get f? Now, f 6-1 is a modified Pythagorean theorem. Okay? So before, when we are still dealing with just two axes, we have square root of f squared plus fy squared for the resultant. But now, since there is a new axis, so we need to add plus f sub c squared, okay, to get the resultant or to get the given force F. So F is equal to the square root of the same principle except that nadagdagan lang ng FC squared. Okay? Now this equation 6-2, so you should also memorize this, and this one 6-1, 6-2 are two important equations that you must be familiarized with. Okay? So itong equation 6-2, ito yung dinerive natin doon sa right triangle. Dito sa tatlong right triangle. Okay? In-express natin yung fx in terms of the force F. That fx is equal to f cosine of theta x. That fy is equal to f cosine theta y. And fc is equal to f cosine theta sub c. So ito na siya. Okay? So take note, lahat yan cosine. Wala kayong makikitang sine. Okay? Because all the x component are adjacent to the angle, to the three angles. Okay? Now, the three angles are called direction angles. Yung theta x, theta y, theta sub c. They are all called direction angles of the given force. No? So they are the direction angles of the given force. Now, kapag yung direction angles, nilagyan na natin ng cosine ang bawat isa, then they are already called direction cosines. Okay? So, halimbawa, yung theta x, cosine theta x. Yung theta y, cosine theta y, cosine theta c. So, they are already transformed into direction cosines of the force. Okay? Now, the direction cosines 6-3 equations, you need not memorize this. Huwag nyo nang i-memorize to at baka ma-confuse lang kayo. Ang i-memorize nyo lang is 6-2. Because 6-3 equations can be derived from 6-2. Okay? Itong 6-3, galing lang to dito. Dinerive lang siya. Okay? Sinolve lang yung cosine theta x is equal to fx over f. Cosine theta y, fy over f. Cosine theta c is fc over c. Fc over f. Okay, so you don't need this. What you need is only 6-2. And bakit ayaw kong ipamemorize to sa inyo? Mahirap i-memorize to. Mahirap mag-memorize ng mayroong division. No, mas madali ito. Yung mayroong multiplication. Okay, so do not familiarize 6-3 because these equations are or can just be derived from 6-2. Now, if you substitute itong 6-2 equations, yung mga components, pag sinubstitute ninyo dun sa Pythagorean theorem, yung modified Pythagorean theorem, ito, sinubstitute nyo, no? Then, you will arrive at this identity-like equation, 6-4. Okay? So, pag sinubstitute, ito na yung lumabas. Common yung f squared, divide both sides by f squared. So, what will remain is cosine squared theta x plus cosine squared theta y plus cosine squared theta c is equal to 1. So, equation 6-4 is another equation to be memorized. And this is called identity-like equation. Okay, identity-like because similar to identity except that wala siyang sine squared. they are all expressed in terms of cosine squared. Okay? And the summation of the squares of all the direction cosines is equal to 1. So yun yung equation. Okay? Now this equation, 6-4, is used in solving for the remaining angle. Because in spatial force system, you will just be given by the two direction angles, either theta x and theta y, or theta y and theta c only, or theta x and theta z only. So if you are given the two direction angles, then that means you are going to solve for the remaining direction angle. And how are you going to solve that? Okay, that is answered by equation 6-4. Okay, let us have some examples. Express the force F in terms of rectangular components. So given the force F with magnitude of 400 newtons. Okay, what is 45 degrees? That is theta what? What does 45 degrees represent? Okay, theta sub x, because it is with respect to x, or it is attached to the x-axis. Okay, and what is 60 degrees?
Theta y.
Okay, theta y. So meaning to say, theta sub x and theta sub y are the two given direction angles. So that means to say, theta sub c was not given, and that means you are going to solve it. Okay? So theta sub c, although the requirements are the rectangular components, before you solve the rectangular components, you first need to define theta sub c bago kayo pumunta sa components. Okay? So as I've said, the missing angle can be solved by using the identity-like equation. Okay? So two angles are given, x and y. So wala ito. But you have this equation, one equation, one unknown, you can solve the problem. Okay? So solve first for theta sub z, substitute to the identity-like equation, given these two angles. So that means to say cosine squared theta z is unknown. So subtract the summation of two squares from 1. You transpose, di ba? Transposing the squares of theta x and theta y. Yan, 1 minus cosine squared 45 minus cosine squared 60. So you get 0.25. But that is cosine squared, no? We need to find only theta sub c. So extracting the square root, with cosine theta c is plus or minus 0.5. Of course, we are not after the cosine theta c, but we are after theta sub c. So this means that we need to solve for theta sub c is equal to r cosine of positive 0.5, and theta sub c is equal to r cosine negative 0.5. Okay? So that means we will be getting two angles, 60 degrees and 120. Now, which of the two is the correct angle? Okay? So how are we going to know which of these two are we going to choose? Okay, we go back to the given. So nakikita nyo, as I've said earlier, when you are given by the orientation of these three axes, that means to say this shows all the positive axes. Okay? Positive x, positive y, positive c. Okay? So from that figure, we can see that the components of f are all positive. Okay? So therefore, theta sub c must be acute. Okay? Theta sub c must be acute. So we need to choose 60 degrees. Okay? So positive. Kasi yung 120, negative yung kanyang angle, no? Negative 0.5 yung cosine niya. Okay? So we need to choose 60 degrees. Okay? Kasi lahat ng components niya ay positive. Okay? Kasi that they are given by all the positive three axes, no? Positive x, positive y, positive z. So therefore, f is given and the direction cosines can already be solved kasi na-solve na natin yung mga angles. Then we are now ready to solve for the components. Okay? Fx is equal to f cosine theta x. So 400 cosine 45. So this is square root of 2 over 2. Okay? So that is equal to 283 newtons. But in our agreement, ano yung agreement natin? Round off to 2 decimal place. So that should be 282.84. Okay, so pag pinasolve ko yan, your final answer should be 282.84 newtons. Okay? Similarly, Fy is equal to F cosine theta y. And we know that 60 degrees is pi over 3. And cosine ng pi over 3 is 1/2. Okay? So half of 400, of course, we have 200.00 newtons. Okay? And lastly, the z component, F cosine theta sub z. Oh, this is exactly the same, 1/2 din, cosine 60. So that is 200.00 newtons. Nagkataon lang, no? Na parehas yung kanilang component because they have the same direction angle. Nagkataon, no? But that's not always the case. It will all depend on the given angle. Okay? So there are 3 answers. Ito, you should have this. But in our case, we have an agreement that all final answers must be expressed or rounded off to 2 decimal place. Okay? Any questions in this particular example? Okay, let's move to the second example. Find the magnitude and direction angles of a force F if its rectangular components are 20.5 pound force, 56.7 pound force, and negative 34.8 pound force along the X, Y, and Z axis, respectively. Okay? So as you can see, nagkaroon ng negative component, and that is the Z component. No? Pag sinabing respectively, sunod-sunod yan. Kung ano yung nauna, yun yung sa X. Kung ano yung pangalawa, yun yung sa Y. And last is Z. So the Z component is negative. So meaning to say, that component lies along the negative Z axis. Okay? So we are asked to find the magnitude of the force and the direction angles. So 4 ang requirement. Magnitude of F and the direction angles. What are these? Theta X, theta Y, and theta C. In terms of degrees, of course. Okay? Okay, so ang given naman dito are the rectangular components. Nakita nyo? Itong 20.5, 56.7, negative 34.8. And these are Fx, Fy, and F sub Z. Yun yung given ngayon. Ang nawawala, yung F. What is F? We do not know. And theta X, theta Y, and theta C are also not given. Okay? So to solve first for the magnitude, saan natin makikita yung magnitude? Dun sa modified Pythagorean theorem equation. We are given Fx, Fy, and Fc, so all we need to do is simply substitute all the components. Substitute each, then square, then sum up, and then extract the square root of the sum. So we have the magnitude of F, 69.6 pound force. Now, how do we solve for the direction angles? Saan makikita yung direction angles? Dito sa equation na to, no? Equation 6-2. Doon yung makukuha. And to solve for theta x, that is arc cosine of fx over f. Theta sub y is arc cosine of fy over f. And theta sub c is arc cosine of fc over f. Okay? Ito. So, as I've said, kung memorize niyo yung 6-2, then you can just simply derive other formulas from that, no? So in this case, you can derive theta x as r cosine fx over f. Now, since fx and f are given, yung fx given sa problem, yung f, ito yung lumabas dito sa modified Pythagorean theorem. Okay? So, given na to, so one equation, one unknown in theta x, we can solve for theta x. So, our cosine of the quotient of this, so we have 72.9 degrees. Or to be exact, what is that? Compute nga ninyo up to 2 decimal place. .87 degrees, to be exact. Okay, in our agreement. Okay, 72.87 degrees. Pero ito ngang F, kailangan ano yan eh. Paki-compute nga kung ano exact nitong 69.6. $69.61 ang pinaka-exact nito. 69.61. So, 69.61 should be the denominator, no? So, yun dapat ang ano. 20.5. Yes?
Ask ko lang po, sir. Pag ako po, sir, nagsusolve po, sir, kapag nakuha ko po, sir, yung component po or yung resultant, ay yung first po, yung component po ng mga ng force po, like f of x po. Ang ginagawa ko po, sir, 3 decimals po ako doon. Tapos, yung sa final answer, para pag sa solve po, mas exact po or dapat po 2 decimals po para ano. Nagawa ko po, sir, 3 decimals po para exact po yung sagot.
Kasi di ba yung fx given 20.5, so wala na kayong gagawin doon, di ba? 20.5 ang gagamitin niyo. Yung f, paka-compute nyo nitong extract, pwede nyo ng 69.61, so yun ang ilagay nyo rito.
Ay hindi po, sa iba pong problem po, sir. Like, kapag ganun po ginagawa po, sir. Pag, kunyari, pag sinolve mo po, sir, yung sa, like po doon sa lesson 1 po, sir, sinolve po yung sa, yung component po, yung sa, yung
bakit
x
3
component
decimal
y,
place?
y component po.
Bakit nilagay mo sa 3?
Ay, para po pag sinolve po, sir, yung sa, yung resultant po, sir, mas exact po. Or dapat po, 2 decimal na po, sir,
No,
diretso?
it's not that. Hindi ganon.
2 decimal na po, sir, diretso?
2 decimal, no? Gaya nito, di ba itong this one, okay? Up to 2 decimal yan, 69.61. So yun yung gagamitin nyo rito. 69.61. So 20.5 divided by 69.61. So dito, 72.87 degrees. Okay? So ang divisor nyo dito is 69.61, yung 2 decimal place na galing sa F. Okay? Dito ganun din. 69.61 ang divisor nyo, pare-parehas. Okay? So you have all of this, 72.87 degrees. Ito, ilan ba itong pangalawa? 56.7 divided by 35.46 degrees ito. 35.46 degrees. And then for the last one, this is 120.00 degrees. Okay? 120.00 degrees kasi yung lumabas is 119.995248. Okay? So since after tayo ng 2 decimal place, yung nakadecimal na kasi dito 0.995248. Parehas na siya 0.99 tapos katabi niya si 5, which is already half, then 0.99 divided by 5, 1 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 rounded na siya. Magiging 0 na yung 9. Kaya magiging 120.00 dito sa last. Okay? So these are the answers. 69.61 pound force, 72.87 degrees, 35.46 degrees, and 120.00 degrees. Now, how do you know that you get the correct direction angles? Paano nyo malalaman na tama itong 72.87, 35.46, 120? Paano nyo malalaman? Okay. The best way to check is to substitute all of these angles to the identity-like equation. Okay? Cosine squared ng bawat isa, add them, then try to see if the sum of these three are all equal to 1 or almost equal to 1. Okay? So ito, 0.998, almost equal to 1. So that is already correct. Okay? Wag lang kayo ditong wag lang magre-result dito ng 0.89, 0.87. Masyadong malayo na 'yon. Okay? At least nasa 0.95, 0.98, 0.97. Pwede na 'yon as long as it is almost equal to 1. Okay? So here, nag-equal siya sa 0.998. Then that means that the three direction angles are correct. Okay? Okay, in summary, so itong yung equation 6-2. So you have to memorize this. This is the modified Pythagorean theorem. 6-3, you don't need this because all of this can be derived from 6-2. Identity-like equation is also equally important, so you need to memorize this. Okay, solve exercises now for these two problems and then submit at exactly 11:35. Okay? Write your name on the paper, then take a picture or scan, then submit to my messenger after you are done. So in 10 minutes, solve this and then submit to my messenger.